Your lawsuit has ended. The Diesel brothers are sharing their side of the story. A federal judge ordered the custom truck makers to pay more than $800,000 to the U.S. government as well as Davis County.
The man who built his empire by turning broken trucks into million-dollar machines ended up watching federal marshals take control of his own life. Heavy D. Sparks had spent years convincing millions of fans that nothing could stop the Diesel brothers, until it suddenly vanished from television without warning. Heavy D has finally broken his silence and revealed what really happened. So, what really happened to the Diesel brothers? And how did an empire built on success begin to fall apart? Join us as we unpack the real reason Diesel brothers ended, according to Heavy D, the empire that nobody thought could fall. The Diesel brothers should never have disappeared. By every measure that matters in reality, television, the show was too big, too beloved, and too commercially successful to simply vanish from the airwaves. And yet, by the end of 2022, it had done exactly that. The series premiered on Discovery Channel on January 4th, 2016. It followed a group of friends in Utah who repaired and customized pickup trucks. At the center of it all were two men named David Heavy D. Sparks, and David Diesel Dave Kiley, who were not actually brothers despite the name and their physical resemblance. They had started a restoration shop for all types of vehicles and brought in a couple of helpers along the way. The business was modest. The ambitions were not. What set them apart from every other garage in Utah was their understanding of social media. They posted various videos on YouTube, raw and unfiltered footage of their builds, their pranks, and their chaotic energy. One of those early clips led to an appearance on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Subsequently, Discovery Channel contacted the Diesel brothers. The network saw what everyone else was seeing: two charismatic personalities with a gift for entertainment and a bottomless well of content. On the show, Heavy D and Diesel Dave would scour the country for old, broken-down diesel trucks, restore them to incredible condition, and sell them for profit. Of course, people tuned in for the trucks, but what made every episode feel like hanging out with old friends was their natural chemistry. The show ran for 6 seasons and produced 49 episodes. Over those nearly 7 years, the Diesel brothers brand expanded far beyond television. The show spawned merchandise lines, a video game, and a diesel engine repair shop that became a destination for fans. Heavy D built a YouTube following that exceeded 4 million subscribers, while his Instagram following reached 3.8 million. Soon, the Diesel Sellers brand was generating revenue streams that made the television show almost secondary. The business ecosystem they had constructed, Sparks Motors, the repair shop in Woods Cross, Utah, the merchandise, the events, and the digital content was humming at full capacity. By the time the show was in its later seasons, the Diesel brothers had become a perfect blend of niche automotive enthusiasm and mainstream entertainment. They had kicked it with celebrities ranging from Kanye West to Jake and Logan Paul, and even had Marshawn Lynch crushing a Jeep in one of their monster trucks. At its peak, Diesel brothers became one of Discovery's standout reality series. However, underneath the success, cracks were already forming. The same aggressive builds that made Diesel brothers famous were attracting attention from people who believed the show had gone too far. But if Diesel brothers was still attracting millions of fans and generating multiple streams of income, why would Heavy D walk away from the very platform that made him famous? Was the show really canceled? Or was something else happening behind the scenes? The decision that changed everything. When Diesel brothers stopped airing new episodes in December 2022, the rumors spread quickly. Maybe Discovery had canceled the show because the lawsuit had finally caught up with them. Maybe the network had pulled the plug to avoid further embarrassment. It was a clean narrative, and it made intuitive sense to anyone who had followed the show's legal troubles. But the clean narrative was wrong. Heavy D and Diesel Dave have pushed back against the claims of their fans. In fact, they revealed in 2023 that the decision to end the show was their own. The duo simply decided to upload content to YouTube instead of going through Discovery. The decision came down to something more fundamental than ratings or legal pressure: creative control. Network television came with rigid schedules, limited creative freedom, and corporate oversight that no longer aligned with their vision. Instead, they turned their attention to YouTube, where they could post when and how they wanted, connecting directly with their fan base without interference. The economics of YouTube made the transition viable. Heavy D already had a massive following on his personal channel. The move to digital platforms gave them something television never could: complete creative control. The content could be longer, rawer, and more authentic. The connection with fans could be direct, unfiltered by network gatekeepers. But Discovery had not officially canceled the show. The network simply didn't renew it for another season. Networks quietly let shows expire all the time without making formal announcements. At the time, the decision looked like the future of entertainment. Why depend on a network when millions of fans were already waiting online? But what Heavy D gained in freedom, he lost in something far more valuable: protection. Discovery provided something that YouTube couldn't: distribution at scale. The network had promotional muscle that no independent creator could match. When Diesel Brothers aired on Discovery, millions of viewers discovered the show who might never have found it on their own. The move to digital platforms meant reaching an audience that was already converted, not one that needed to be won over. Leaving Discovery gave them independence, but it also meant they were navigating life without the same platform and protection television had provided. But was leaving Discovery actually the turning point that changed everything? Or had the biggest threat to the Diesel Brothers' empire already appeared years before they ever left television? The lawsuit that put the empire in danger. The first warning sign appeared before Diesel Brothers reached its peak. The legal trouble began during the show's first years, when Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment, a nonprofit medical advocacy group, filed a civil lawsuit against the Diesel Brothers. The allegations were serious. The group claimed that Heavy D and his associates had engaged in significant, repeated, and ongoing violations of federal law by modifying vehicles in ways that violated the Clean Air Act. The practice was known as rolling coal, removing emissions control equipment so diesel trucks could produce massive clouds of black smoke on demand. The evidence was damning. The Physicians Group purchased a modified truck from Sparks Motors, and independent testing confirmed that without the required emissions features, the truck produced 36 times the pollutants and 21 times the particulate matter compared to a stock truck. These weren't minor infractions. These were trucks that had been turned into rolling pollution machines along Utah's Wasatch Front, a region with a well-known chronic air pollution problem. The case, filed in 2017, named Diesel Power Gear LLC, B and W Auto LLC, David Sparks, and Joshua Redbeard Stewart as defendants. The suit alleged that the defendants illegally removed pollution control equipment from diesel trucks and then sold those parts and trucks as part of their reality TV show, violating the Clean Air Act and Utah law. In June 2018, after hearing testimony from an emissions inspector that a Diesel Brothers truck had been illegally modified, a judge issued an injunction prohibiting any similar modifications in the future. The legal pressure was building, but the show kept rolling. In 2020, a federal judge ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, finding Sparks and co-defendants liable. the court found that they had violated the Clean Air Act on hundreds of occasions. The defendants were fined $850,000 for violating the Clean Air Act more than 400 times. The Diesel brothers appealed in April 2020, though an appeals court upheld the verdict. In 2021, the court required Sparks and another defendant to pay nearly $1 million in penalties. To this day, the two sides remain locked in litigation. The findings created a devastating contradiction for the brand. The modifications that made their trucks famous were the same modifications regulators argued violated federal law. The Diesel brothers were caught between what made them popular and what the law required. The bigger the builds got, the more attention they attracted from the very people trying to shut them down. They had become victims of their own success, trapped in a cycle where the thing that made them famous was also the thing that could destroy them. Heavy D himself admitted he regretted some of the past modifications, acknowledging that while punishment was fair in some respects, the ongoing litigation felt excessive. However, the legal battles were far from over. What happens when the name that built your empire becomes the very thing threatening to destroy it? The name that cost them millions. The environmental lawsuit wasn't the only legal battle threatening the Diesel brothers' empire. While the Clean Air Act case was making headlines, another fight was brewing, one that struck at the very heart of the brand they had built. The Italian fashion company Diesel SPA came after them for something far more fundamental than pollution: their name. For years, the word diesel was more than a name. It was the foundation of everything they built: the shirts fans wore, the trucks they customized, the company they created. Then one of the world's biggest fashion brands argued that the name belonged to them first. The trademark dispute began in 2019, when the fashion brand filed a complaint in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. Diesel alleged that Diesel Power Gear, the brand created by Sparks and Kylie, was running afoul of federal trademark law by using the Diesel Power Gear and Diesel Sellers marks in connection with its business and on various apparel and accessories. The fashion company claimed trademark infringement, trademark dilution, and unfair competition. The legal fight dragged on for years. In 2022, a New York federal court granted a partial summary judgment on Diesel's trademark infringement, unfair competition, and dilution claims against Sparks and Kylie. The court found that the parties' marks were confusingly similar, including DPG's use of the marks on its physical storefront and website domains. The court also found that DPG's misappropriation of the Diesel mark was willful because it had acted with reckless disregard of plaintiffs' Diesel trademarks. The damages phase was where the real sting came. Diesel argued that it was entitled to Diesel Power Gear's net sales of $59.1 million, claiming the company hadn't proved any deductible costs or expenses. Diesel Power Gear countered that its profits should be based on a smaller subset of sales, and that business expenses should be deducted. The court ruled that awarding Diesel the full amount would be excessive, and instead reduced the net sales by 80%, resulting in a total settlement of nearly $12 million. The irony was brutal. The Diesel brothers had spent years building a recognizable brand, a name that fans associated with massive trucks, outrageous builds, and the chaotic energy of two friends who had made it big. That name, which had taken years of hard work to establish, became the very thing that cost them nearly $12 million. The judgment became another major financial burden on an empire already facing legal pressure. What happens when the pressure finally reaches the person at the center of the empire? The moment Heavy D lost control. The legal disputes had created years of financial pressure and ongoing court obligations. David Sparks asserted he could not pay the fees, citing the sudden death of his accountant for his inability to track down documentation of his finances. In July 2025, he held a garage sale at his Davis County-based warehouse. The court deemed this an unlawful attempt to liquidate his assets. All the while, Sparks hadn't paid a dime to UPHE. The defendants in the case were found in contempt on June 24, 2024. Then Sparks was found in contempt for a second time on August 4, 2025, for transferring property, which was not allowed under the first contempt order. On October 2, 2025, the court found defendant Sparks in civil contempt and issued a bench warrant for his arrest. District Judge Robert Shelby wrote that having exhausted all other mechanisms to ensure his compliance with court orders, the court will order defendant Sparks incarcerated until he complies with the specific requirements necessary to purge his contempt. The judge also noted that over the course of this near-decade-long litigation, defendant David W. Sparks has repeatedly and willfully violated this court's orders. Sparks was arrested and booked into the Salt Lake County Jail on Tuesday, October 7, 2025. Federal marshals carried out the arrest. A contempt hearing was held on October 9, 2025. The court ordered his release from custody at the conclusion of the hearing. Sparks spent 2 nights in the Salt Lake County Jail. Sparks' attorney emphasized that his client was not arrested for a crime and that the arrest stems from a civil matter involving zealous environmental attorneys seeking to collect attorneys' fees. The distinction mattered legally. It didn't matter publicly. Days after Sparks' arrest, the Utah businessman and internet star called on his massive social media following to hold UPHE accountable for its attempts to collect on his debt. He noted that he had been quiet about the nearly 9-year legal brawl, largely declining to comment to the press or post about it publicly. Spending time in jail, however, prompted him to set the record straight. The arrest drew renewed attention to Heavy D's legal battles. The image of Heavy D, the larger-than-life television personality who had built trucks and entertained millions, being led away by federal marshals was a public relations catastrophe. Heavy D's public image was built around control, but now events outside his control were beginning to define him. As if that wasn't enough, 5 months after walking out of Salt Lake City Jail, Heavy D found himself back inside a courtroom story, except this time he wasn't the one who filed the paperwork. On March 10, 2026, his wife, Ashley Sparks, went to a Utah courthouse and filed for divorce. Ashley and Heavy D had built a life together over more than 15 years by the time the filing landed, married since August 2010, and raising 3 kids along the way, a daughter named Charlie Mae, and 2 sons, Bo and Mac. No one knew exactly what caused their divorce, as both parties replied with silence whenever reporters asked. All we know is that Ashley had decided the marriage was over, and she was the one who walked into the courthouse to make it official. And the timing couldn't have been worse. The legal battles, the financial pressure, the public scrutiny, and the arrest had taken a toll that went far beyond the television screen, and the man who had been its public face was now facing the collapse of his personal life as well. And when the dust settled, what would be left of the Diesel brothers? What remains after the fall? Despite everything, Heavy D continued to build his personal brand. His YouTube channel, with its millions of subscribers, remained active. He continued to customize vehicles, post content, and engage with his audience. But with the television show gone, the empire that had once seemed invincible was now a shadow of its former self. Diesel Dave, meanwhile, had pursued his own path. The 2 Daves, who had built their entire brand on a friendship that felt like family, were no longer the inseparable pair that fans had watched on screen for years. They weren't feuding. They weren't estranged. They were simply two people who had built an identity together and were now moving in different directions. But the Diesel brothers weren't just Heavy D and Diesel Dave. The show featured a full cast of characters that fans grew to love. There was Josh Stewart, fondly known as Redbeard. He was a co-founder of Diesel Sellers and managed the business aspects of the operation. Even though his last appearance on the show was in 2019, his bio remains on the Discovery website, suggesting he remained part of the team. Another core member is Keaton Hoskins, also known as the Muscle. Keaton and Diesel Dave had been friends since 8th grade, and just like Redbeard, he also helped operate Diesel Sellers. They didn't just share in the profit, they also bore some of the consequences. In the Clean Air lawsuit, they are both named as co-defendants, alongside Heavy D and Diesel Dave. Diesel Dave, meanwhile, had pursued his own path. He remained an owner and continued to be involved in major business decisions and strategic planning. But the two Daves were no longer the inseparable pair that fans had watched on screen for years. Is it possible for the show to return? While the brand still had value and the fan base was still there, after all, Heavy D's continued social media presence and YouTube activity suggest there remains an audience hungry for his content. But the Diesel brothers that fans had loved were gone. What remained was something different. Heavy D, the individual content creator, building vehicles on his own. Diesel Dave, pursuing his own projects. Two men who had once been inseparable, now following separate paths. In the end, the Diesel brothers weren't destroyed by their enemies. They were destroyed by their own success. So were the Diesel brothers a victim of circumstances beyond their control? Or did the choices that built their empire also create the problems that brought it down? And if Heavy D had stayed with Discovery, would the story have ended differently? Or were these battles waiting for him no matter what path he chose? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.